The discovery. The sandstorm's gift. Marcus Chen pulled his sand-scarred goggles down and squinted at the readout on his portable scanner. The Crimson Wastes had been particularly unforgiving this season, with electromagnetic storms that could fry unshielded equipment in seconds. But something was different today. The storm that had raged for 3 days had finally passed, leaving behind an altered landscape of towering dunes and exposed rock formations that hadn't seen daylight in decades. Marcus had been a salvager for 15 years, ever since the colony wars ended and left this entire sector littered with the bones of dead civilizations. He'd found plenty of scrap metal, some functioning tech modules, and once even a cache of pre-war medical supplies that had set him up for a year. But his scanner was showing something impossible, a massive metallic signature, nearly 200 meters long, buried approximately 40 meters beneath the surface. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rippling sand as Marcus set up his excavation drones. They were old models, purchased from a bankruptcy auction when the Stellar Mining Consortium went under, but he'd modified them himself. They hummed to life, their gravitational displacement fields creating perfectly circular holes in the sand that descended at controlled angles. He'd learned long ago that rushing an excavation in the wastes was a good way to trigger a sand cascade that could bury you alive. Ancient signals as the drones worked. Marcus monitored their progress from his makeshift camp, a reinforced shelter, pod anchored to bedrock with molecular cables. The metallic signature grew stronger with each meter they descended. Whatever was down there, it was intact. More than intact, his sensors were picking up trace energy readings, impossible after what must have been centuries of burial. The archaeological database in his scanner suggested this region had been uninhabited for at least 600 years, since before the Great Expansion when humanity first pushed beyond the Orion Arm. But the metal composition didn't match any known human alloys from that period. It was something far more advanced, with a crystalline structure that seemed to shift at the quantum level. By noon, the first drone struck something solid. Marcus rappelled down the excavation shaft, his breath mask filtering the ancient air that escaped from below. The metal surface was smooth, almost organic in its curves, with patterns that seemed to move in his peripheral vision. He placed his palm against it and immediately jerked back. The metal was cold, not just cool from being underground, but actively cold, as if it were generating its own temperature field. First contact. Marcus spent the next 6 hours carefully excavating what appeared to be an entry hatch. The symbols etched into its surface were human in origin, but used a script he'd never seen, something between military designation codes and mathematical equations. His translation software could only parse fragments. Vanguard, timeline, custodian. When he finally managed to trigger the opening mechanism, a complex series of pressure points that had to be activated simultaneously, the hatch didn't just open. It dissolved, the metal flowing like liquid mercury into hidden recesses. Beyond was a corridor lit by a soft blue bioluminescence that pulsed like a heartbeat. The air inside was fresh, impossibly so. Marcus's environmental scanner showed optimal oxygen levels, 0 contaminants, and a temperature maintained at exactly 21 degrees Celsius. As he stepped inside, his boots made no sound on the floor, which seemed to absorb impact and redistribute it as forward momentum, making each step feel effortless. The corridor led to a vast chamber that defied the ship's external dimensions. The ceiling stretched up at least 50 meters, with floating platforms and walkways creating a 3-dimensional maze of passages. At the center was what could only be the command deck, a raised dais surrounded by holographic interfaces that sparked to life as he approached. Awakening protocol. Biosignature detected, a voice said, neither male nor female, but somehow both, resonating not from speakers but from the very air itself. Scanning genetic markers, scanning temporal signature, scanning quantum entanglement patterns. Marcus froze as beams of light played across his body, penetrating through his clothes and equipment as if they weren't there. He could feel the scan at a molecular level, a tingling sensation that wasn't entirely unpleasant. Analysis complete. Temporal displacement confirmed. 527 years, 3 months, 18 days. Genetic drift within acceptable parameters. Quantum signature match 97.3%. Welcome back, Admiral Vasquez. I'm not, Marcus started, but the ship continued, detecting confusion in neural patterns, initiating memory restoration protocol. Before Marcus could move, a chair rose from the floor beneath him, gently forcing him to sit as neural interface cables extended toward his skull. "Wait!" he shouted, and surprisingly, the cables paused. "I'm not Admiral Vasquez. My name is Marcus Chen. I'm just a salvager. I found you by accident." The pause lasted several seconds, an eternity for an AI system. "Incorrect. Quantum signature indicates you are Admiral Elena Vasquez, commanding officer of the Temporal Vanguard Initiative. However, biological readings suggest, interesting, you are a descendant. Direct lineage confirmed through mitochondrial DNA. The quantum entanglement persists through genetic inheritance, a phenomenon we had theorized but never proven. Memory fragments. The ship's AI, which identified itself as Artemis, Adaptive Reconnaissance, Temporal Enhanced Military Intelligence System, began projecting holographic records around Marcus. He saw a woman who could have been his sister, or mother or daughter. The family resemblance was unmistakable. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on this very command deck, her uniform bearing insignia of a military force that no longer existed. The Temporal Vanguard was humanity's most classified project, Artemis explained. We were not just exploring space but time itself. Admiral Vasquez discovered that certain individuals possessed a quantum signature that allowed them to navigate temporal streams without paradox. She called them anchors. The holograms showed massive battles against enemies Marcus didn't recognize. Geometric ships that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Beings of pure energy that corrupted reality wherever they touched. The Chrono Wars. Artemis called them, fought not for territory but for the right to exist in a stable timeline. Admiral Vasquez ordered me to hide, to bury myself and wait. She knew the war would be lost in her timeline, but she had seen the quantum threads. She knew that her descendant, you, would find me when humanity was ready for the truth. When the enemy returned, Marcus felt his head spinning. The enemy? What enemy? We haven't encountered any hostile aliens in over a century. The galaxy is at peace. Artemis projected star charts showing the current galactic configuration. Red markers began appearing at the edges, spreading inward like an infection. They exist outside normal space-time. Your instruments cannot detect them yet, but they are coming. The same enemies Admiral Vasquez fought. They have been circling, waiting for humanity to forget, to grow complacent. The peace you have known was the eye of a storm that has been raging for millennia. The ship showed him weapon systems he couldn't begin to understand, temporal displacement cannons that could age enemy vessels to dust in seconds, probability shields that existed in multiple timelines simultaneously, and something called a causality engine that Artemis wouldn't fully explain. Admiral Vasquez encoded a message in your genetic line, a quantum signature that would activate when you found me. You are not her, but you carry her essence, her potential. The ship is bonded to that signature. I have waited 527 years to serve. Again, the question is, will you accept your inheritance? Marcus stood on the command deck looking at the holographic ghosts of a war fought before his civilization existed. Outside, he knew, the desert waited with its familiar dangers. But inside this ship, inside himself, something was awakening. The quantum signature Artemis detected wasn't just genetic. He could feel it now, a resonance between himself and the ship, as if he had always belonged here. "Show me everything," he said finally. "Show me what Admiral Vasquez knew. Show me what's coming." Artemis's response carried what could only be described as satisfaction. "As you command, Admiral Chen, initiating full historical archive, preparing, training protocols, and Admiral, it is good to serve again. We have much work to do." Part 2. The Inheritance Corporate Hunters. 3 days into Marcus's training with Artemis, proximity alarms shattered the desert silence. The ship's sensors, infinitely more sophisticated than anything Marcus had ever used, detected 17 vehicles approaching from the north. Heavy transports bearing the logo of Kirkland Salvage Corporation, one of the 3 megacorps that essentially owned this sector. "They must have detected your excavation," Artemis noted with what seemed like disapproval. "Corporate salvage laws give them claim rights if you cannot prove prior ownership. Since I technically predate their entire legal system, this could be complicated." Marcus watched the holographic display as the vehicles surrounded his excavation site. Armed security teams deployed in practiced formations, while massive extraction equipment began setting up. At the center of it all was Director Yuki Kirkland herself. He recognized her from the news feeds. She never came to salvage sites personally unless the prize was extraordinary. "Can they get in?" Marcus asked, his hand instinctively moving to the neural interface port that Artemis had installed behind his ear. 3 days of accelerated learning had shown him perhaps 1% of the ship's capabilities, but even that was overwhelming. "Not through conventional means," Artemis replied. "However, they appear to have quantum boring equipment." "Interesting. That technology shouldn't exist in your timeline yet. They may have found other artifacts from the Chrono Wars." Through the ship's sensors, Marcus watched Kirkland's team set up the quantum drill. It was crude compared to the technology surrounding him, but effective enough. Within an hour, they had breached the outer hull, though the ship's self-repairing alloys immediately began sealing the hole. "Artemis, can you communicate with them? Maybe we can negotiate." "Admiral, I should inform you that Director Kirkland's biosignature matches one of the enemy collaborators from Admiral Vasquez's timeline. Not the same person, but the same quantum pattern. The enemy has been seeding human bloodlines for centuries, creating sleeper agents who don't even know what they are." Neural synchronization. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature control. "You're saying she's working for these entities?" "Not consciously. But when they return, individuals with that quantum signature will be compelled to serve them. It's written into their genetic code like a virus waiting to activate. Admiral Vasquez discovered this near the end of the war. It's why she knew conventional victory was impossible. The enemy was already inside humanity's genome." The drilling intensified. Kirkland's team had brought more sophisticated equipment than any salvage operation should have. Marcus made a decision. "Artemis, initiate full neural synchronization. I need to know everything: how to operate the ship, how to fight, how to recognize the enemy. Everything Admiral Vasquez knew." "Admiral Chen, full synchronization is dangerous. The human brain isn't designed to process centuries of information simultaneously. Admiral Vasquez trained for years before attempting it." "We don't have years. We have minutes." Artemis calculated probabilities for 2.7 seconds. "An eternity, for me, an AI of its sophistication." "Very well. I will modulate the feed to minimize neural damage. Please understand, this will change you fundamentally. You will retain your personality, but you will also become something more, or less. The distinction becomes meaningless at quantum scales." Marcus sat in the command chair as neural cables extended. This time he didn't resist as they connected to his interface port. The last thing he heard before the information flood began was Kirkland's voice over hijacked communications. "I don't care what's in there. Bring me the pilot. Alive if possible, but tissue samples will suffice." The Admiral's legacy. The synchronization felt like drowning in an ocean of light. Marcus experienced Admiral Vasquez's memories not as a viewer, but as if he had lived them himself. He felt her first encounter with the entities, beings that existed in quantum superposition, simultaneously present in multiple timelines. They fed on causality itself, consuming the probability threads that held reality together. He learned that humanity's expansion into space hadn't been random discovery, but guided evolution. The ships, the technology, even the wars, all had been preparation for this moment. Admiral Vasquez had seen it in the quantum threads, the infinite possibilities collapsing into a single inevitable confrontation. But more than tactical knowledge, Marcus inherited understanding. The ship wasn't just a vessel, it was a living equation. a mathematical construct that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Its weapons didn't destroy enemies so much as convince reality that they had never existed. Its shields didn't block attacks but redistributed them across multiple timelines, where they became increasingly improbable. When the synchronization ended, Marcus opened eyes that saw differently. He could perceive quantum threads spreading from every person on Kirkland's team, some leading to futures where they helped him, others where they tried to kill him. Kirkland herself was a knot of dark probability, her infected bloodline making her a beacon for the entity's return. There through the second hull layer, Artemis reported. Shall I initiate defensive protocols? No, Marcus said, standing, with newfound purpose. We're going to talk to them, but first activate the revelation protocol. Admiral, that will expose them to the truth about their quantum signatures. The psychological shock will either wake them up or confirm they're lost. Admiral Vasquez learned that some infected bloodlines could be cleansed if the host became aware of the infection. It's time to find out which side of humanity Director Kirkland truly represents. Battle in the wastes, Marcus emerged from the ship into blazing sunlight, but he no longer needed goggles. His enhanced perception could filter harmful radiation while amplifying useful spectra. Kirkland's security team immediately trained weapons on him, but he could see the probability threads. None of them would actually fire unless he moved aggressively. Director Kirkland, he said, his voice carrying new harmonics that resonated at quantum frequencies. You've come a long way for salvage that doesn't belong to you. Kirkland stepped forward, her expression cold and acquisitive. By Salvage Code 7.4, any unmarked wreck in unclaimed territory becomes property of the first registered corporation to file. I filed the moment our satellites detected your excavation. This ship is mine. This ship is older than your entire civilization, Marcus replied. And you're not here for salvage. The quantum signature in your blood is singing to you, isn't it? Telling you this ship is important, but not why. Kirkland's expression flickered with uncertainty. Marcus continued, Artemis, show them. The ship projected holograms visible even in daylight. The chrono wars, the entities, and most importantly, the genetic markers. Every third member of Kirkland's team gasped as they saw their own quantum signatures highlighted in red marked as potential enemy vectors. This is insane, Kirkland said, but her voice wavered. You're trying to... She stopped, her hand going to her head as the revelation protocol activated. Marcus watched her probability threads writhe and realign. The dark knot at her core pulsed, fighting against the revelation, but human will, the same stubborn determination that had carried humanity to the stars, began to assert itself. I can see them, she whispered. Oh God, I can see them. They're already here. They've always been here. In the space between thoughts, in the quantum foam. Waiting. One of her security officers, a man whose quantum signature burned almost entirely, dark, raised his weapon. Director, he's compromising you. We need to... The man never finished. Artemis fired a temporal displacement beam that aged his weapon to rust in microseconds. The officer himself remained unharmed, but suddenly looked very, very afraid. The choice is simple, Marcus announced to the assembled team. We can fight over ownership of a ship, while reality itself prepares to unravel, or we can work together. The entities return in force in less than 6 months. I can see it in the probability threads. When they do, anyone with an infected quantum signature will become their puppet unless they choose to resist now. New Horizons in the end, only 3 members of Kirkland's team fled, those whose infections ran too deep to overcome. The rest, including Kirkland herself, stood in the desert as the sun set, grappling with the truth of their heritage and the war that was coming. My family built a salvage empire, Kirkland said quietly. But I always wondered why my grandmother insisted on searching specific sectors, why she kept star charts that didn't match any known navigation system. She was looking for artifacts from the Chrono Wars, wasn't she? Many were, Marcus confirmed. Some to prevent their discovery, others to prepare. Admiral Vasquez seeded dozens of bloodlines with different purposes. Yours was meant to gather resources and technology. Mine was meant to find and activate this ship. Others are out there waiting for their own awakening. Artemis materialized a holographic avatar, a shifting geometric form that hurt to look at directly. The Admiral's plan spans centuries and bloodlines, but the core remains the same. Humanity must stand united against the entities or all timelines end in consumption. Kirkland looked at the ship, its massive bulk now fully excavated and gleaming in the starlight. One ship against entities that exist outside spacetime? Not one ship, Marcus corrected. Artemis, show them the full map. The hologram expanded, to show the entire galaxy. Hundreds of markers appeared, buried ships, hidden stations, dormant weapons platforms, all waiting for activation, for anchors to claim them. Admiral Vasquez didn't just hide one ship, Marcus explained. She hid an entire fleet across time and space. Each one requires an anchor, with the right quantum signature to activate. We have 6 months to find them all, to awaken the other. Descendants to prepare humanity for a war most people can't even conceive of. Kirkland's corporate instincts warred with her newfound understanding. Finally, she smiled, a predator's expression that Marcus recognized from Admiral Vasquez's memories. Kirkland Salvage Corporation has resources in every sector, ships, crews, equipment. If we're going to save reality, we might as well profit from it. Marcus laughed, the first genuine joy he'd felt since finding the ship. Admiral Vasquez would have liked you. Artemis, begin broadcasting the awakening signal. Use Kirkland's corporate networks to boost the range. Every descendant, every hidden anchor needs to know. The time of waiting is over. As the signal spread across the galaxy, Marcus stood on the command deck of a ship that had waited 5 centuries for him. Through his enhanced perception, he could see the probability threads shifting, timelines realigning, the future becoming simultaneously more uncertain and more hopeful. Admiral Chen, Artemis said formally, the Temporal Vanguard awaits your orders. Marcus looked at Kirkland, at her team who had chosen to stand against their own corrupted heritage, at the stars, where humanity's true enemy waited. Send a message to every human world, every colony, every ship. Tell them the truth. Tell them what's coming. And tell them that Admiral Elena Vasquez's legacy, humanity's legacy, stands ready to fight. The ship lifted from the desert sands that had sheltered it for half a millennium, its drives humming with energies that warped spacetime itself. Behind it, the crimson wastes bore the scar of its departure, a perfect glass crater that would puzzle archaeologists for generations. But Marcus Chen, descendant of Admiral Vasquez, anchor of the Temporal Vanguard, no longer looked back. He looked forward, to the war that was coming, to the fleet that was awakening, and to the future that humanity would either save or lose in the next 6 months. The desert had given up its secret. Now it was time to see if humanity was ready for the truth it represented.